Can you believe that this creature, which looks like a rat, is actually a human from 1,000 years in the future? Even though he insists he is human, he is only mocked in the presence of the new humans. 1,000 years ago, in 2011, some humans suddenly awakened to superpowers. With the help of technology, the number of people with powers reached 0.3% of the global population. It was these people who changed the whole world. Fast forward a millennium, the world has returned to a pastoral age, and now, all humans possess superpowers. At the start of our story, a girl named Saki wakes up in the middle of the night to find objects in her home flying around chaotically. However, her mother is overjoyed when she enters, because Saki has awakened her spirit blessing and officially become an adult, thus escaping a fate of disappearance. She is sent to the Serene Temple, where the chief priest gives her psychological suggestions, seals Saki's evil power through a Homa ritual, and grants her the pure power of Mantora. After these procedures, Saki is finally able to advance to the Complete Person School, where her friends have long been waiting for her. Satoru jokes that Saki took too long to mature. Suddenly, Saki finds herself at the bottom of the class. What about the others? There's a moment of silence and the topic is changed. Saki feels like they are like creatures corralled on a farm, enslaved and altered, but her friends completely fail to understand what she's saying. However, they soon make up during art class, because the school requires class-based team cooperation. They use their powers to draw on sketchbooks, passing them from one to another. Reiko, who is last in line, fails to complete her drawing. Later, in a game of stacking cards with powers, Reiko fails again. Satoru thinks Reiko is holding them back. After school, he deliberately leaves Reiko out, saying he doesn't want her to develop an inferiority complex, unaware that Reiko disappears that day. On the way home, Saki hears that students who don't graduate from Walkway Garden vanish, a claim Satoru agrees might be true. The teacher opens the school courtyard, revealing countless graves, but obviously, such outrageous claims are not believed. Shun also speaks up. Having been into the school building, he saw only some old warehouses on the courtyard grounds. The girls are all frightened by strange rumors. Satoru mentions the cat trick again. Someone saw a giant cat's shadow on a window. The cat trick enters the school to devour children without powers. Suddenly, Saki collapses, having indeed seen the cat trick before awakening her power. She is terrified. Her mother comforts her, saying it's just a legend, but Saki overhears her parents' conversation, her mother roaring about not wanting to lose another child. Powerless, Saki has already seen the cat trick. Her parents must be hiding something. A month after Reiko's disappearance, the school holds a ball-pushing game as scheduled. On the surface, it seems only a test of control over power, but secretly, it still harbors a mechanism of elimination. The losers will face the fate of disappearance, but the children, still naive, eagerly plan for the game. The day quickly arrives. The rule is to control clay figures to push the ball and defend, aiming to push the ball into the opponent's hole. Reiko cannot directly use power to destroy the opponent's statues. However, in the final round, the opponent cheats, and the protagonist group loses the match. What they don't know is that the cheating student has already been targeted by the teacher's cat trick, and after being stamped as disqualified, completely disappears. Afterwards, they embarked on the long-awaited camping trip. The students had to paddle canoes upstream along the river and survive in the wilderness for 7 days. Unbeknownst to them, this was still a screening process from acceptance to disappearance. On the way home from school, the main group encountered the Bake Nezumi. Saki remembered her father's words from her childhood. The Bake Nezumi are duplicitous creatures, utterly obedient to those with power, and children without the curse would face unknown dangers. Watching the Bake Nezumi diligently cleaning the river, Kato's warning instilled a sense of fear towards them. Suddenly, a Bake Nezumi in front of Mirin slipped and fell into the river. Everyone exclaimed in shock but hesitated to help. Saki stepped forward, despite everyone advising her not to interfere. Seeing Saki's urgency, Shun enlightened her. Saki used her power to rescue the Bake Nezumi. They all agreed that this incident must remain hidden from the school. The rescued Bake Nezumi prostrated themselves and expressed their gratitude. Listening to the few words the Bake Nezumi knew, everyone was not worried about them revealing secrets, as they could not understand their language. Observing the symbols on the Bake Nezumi's forehead, The respected Shun explained that these were symbols distinguishing the Bakenazumi tribes. Afterwards, the group parted ways. In this world, does no one care about the children who disappear? That day, the group embarked on several days of wilderness training. The wilderness was fraught with dangers, such as nest-building snakebirds, whose eggs exploded like bombs upon impact. They collected some just in case. Soon, they faced their first night. Everyone discussed recent sightings of the balloon dog, a creature roughly the size of a dog, entirely black, which inflates like a pufferfish when threatened and then explodes. Everyone doubted Satoru's logic. If it kills itself, what's the point in scaring off enemies? It should have been extinct long ago, right? Satoru then changed the subject. The people who went to Mount Tsukuba not only saw the balloon dog, but also encountered the demonic false Minoshiro. Those who see a Minoshiro soon die. Unexpectedly, Shun decided that this camping trip's theme would be to study the demonic Minoshiro and other rare creatures. Satoru became fearful as he heard that powers do not affect Minoshiro. Nevertheless, the group decided to explore. Later in a draw, Satoru stayed to watch over Mamoru's camp, while the other four went on a night boat trip. Shun used his power to calm the water, reflecting a beautiful starry sky, reminding Saki of something. Her parents, being librarians, had given her substantial knowledge. Minoshiro and many other species had appeared only in the last few centuries, which is impossible according to evolutionary theory. The only possibility was human influence. The next day, after a brief preparation, they continued their journey, defying the teacher's instructions to venture deep into the forest. They indeed encountered the demonic Minoshiro. Its light controlled everyone except for Saki, who wore sunglasses and was not hypnotized. Everyone was terrified. Then Shun said that at that moment, they were paralyzed and could not use their powers. They wanted to leave, but Saki decided to capture the Minoshiro. They caught 2 large crabs and tied them up to lead the way like dogs. Unexpectedly, the crabs rushed into a cave and actually caught the Minoshiro. With Saki's glasses allowing them to act, everyone was again hallucinated by Minoshiro's light. Saki started to attack Minoshiro to save everyone, only to hear a human voice warning her to immediately stop her destructive actions. But under Saki's coercion, the Minoshiro ceased its luminescence, and everyone regained their senses in the next moment. However, the words spoken by the Minoshiro baffled everyone. It claimed to be a mobile library because paper-based information had long since decayed or been destroyed during wars. All information was stored within the Minoshiro's holographic memory device and was accessible at any time. Curious, Saki couldn't wait to resolve the doubts in her mind. The Minoshiro explained that Aki was actually a mental illness from a past civilization that involved indiscriminate killing, and yokai were also beings that appeared in past civilizations. What followed in the Minoshiro's recounting of history made the children tremble with fear. 1,000 years ago, people first discovered individuals with psychic abilities. Initially, these individuals posed no threat to the world until the emergence of a Japanese boy, A, who became a catalyst for global upheaval. The boy discovered he could unlock any door, which led him down a path of crime, brutally murdering 17 young girls. After Boy A was arrested, it incited more psychics to commit evil, turning into terrorists who caused mass casualties in attempts to overthrow politics and human rights and dominate ordinary people. From there, the world plunged into an unprecedented era of warfare. However, the war did not reduce the number of those with powers. Instead, it drastically decreased the population of ordinary people to just 2% of its original number, as everyone's power was comparable to nuclear weapons. This led to a dark age that lasted over 500 years. Human society was forced into 4 irreconcilable groups. The first was the power-holding slave dynasties that ruled over ordinary people. The second type consisted of powerless hunters who fled the slave dynasties and hid in the deep mountains. The third were raiders who constantly used their psychic abilities to kill, and the last were cultural organizations that barely managed to inherit scientific technology. The children were terrified. The slave dynasty was the most significant part throughout the Dark Age. Japan had seen 4 slave dynasties, but Minoshiro's database contained records only of the most powerful, the Holy Sakura dynasty, which lasted 570 years and produced 794 kings. Each emperor was more brutal than the last. Successors, upon awakening their psychic abilities, would instantly kill the reigning emperor to usurp the throne. The 79th emperor was especially inhumane. He enjoyed killing people in his dreams. During his reign, the population halved, and corpses were everywhere, with the stench of death reaching miles away. Satoru was terrified, but Shun was still eager to learn more about the past. With tyranny, there naturally came resistance. The hunting tribes, at the cost of countless lives, overthrew the slave dynasty. The scientific civilization group, which had been watching from the sidelines, finally stepped forward and ended the era of slavery altogether. Shun then posed a question. Logically speaking, weren't they descendants of the scientific group? Then why, each walking like a nuclear bomb, had no terrifying wars ensued again? Minoshiro once again provided an answer. Psychic abilities possess infinite possibilities. Thus, they developed some restrictive measures. The first proposed was education, followed by psychological methods. By combining these two approaches, they could identify and eliminate problem children 100%. Later, the study of animal behavior became mainstream. People have found that because the bonobo society is full of love, conflicts among them are rare. Regardless of age, sex, or gender, they relieved stress through love. Even so, everyone was still not at ease because even just one person losing control of their power could lead to the destruction of the entire civilization. To this end, humanity has directly installed two locks in their genes. One is an inhibition against aggressive impulses, and the other is known as the Kishiku mechanism, which is essentially like embedding morality into the genes. Whenever there is a thought of attacking their own kind, the body will issue a warning, such as an accelerated heartbeat and difficulty breathing. If the initiator of the attack does not cease, the body will shut down or even lead to death. Shun realized that this system was completely designed to prevent the emergence of Aki and yokai. However, what they did not know is that there still exist two bugs. The first is the uncontrolled power of an Aki, which inadvertently kills people, hence it does not trigger Kishiku. The second is the more terrifying yokai, who are individuals suffering from mental illness and are immune to the two genetic rules. Just as Minoshiro was about to inform the protagonists of this, it was suddenly engulfed in flames. Before dying, Minoshiro projected a vision of a mother holding her child. A bald man appeared who would not allow the children to listen to Minoshiro's nonsense. It turns out the monk was from Seijoji Temple, a place that can seal powers. Because the group violated the rules, the monk completely sealed the power of all 5 individuals and took them back to the temple for punishment. On the way, the group discussed the likelihood of being disposed of upon their return. At this time, Shun noticed something unusual about the monk. The vision projected by Minoshiro just before its death had triggered the monk's Kishiku. Although he did not actually kill anyone, the incident had severely affected the monk. Suddenly, there was an explosion in the deep forest, and a giant Bakenazumi blocked their path. Instead of revering them as deities, the Bakenazumi were now attacking them. In an instant, the monk incinerated the Bakenazumi's weapons and seized it, only to find that it bore no mark on its head, indicating that these Bakenazumi came from another place. He then mercilessly killed it. To intimidate the Bakenazumi, the monk, despite severe pain, used his power to blast a path open. However, the end of the road was already blocked by a group of Bakenazumi. Without hesitation, the monk began to gather power, and the Bakenazumi were quickly annihilated. Suddenly, a balloon dog emerged from the body of a Bakenazumi. The balloon dog's body rapidly expanded, and the monk, using all his strength, shielded the children. A massive explosion echoed through the woods, leaving a large crater filled with darts, which were actually the bones of the balloon dog. Everyone was stunned. Could there really be an animal that evolved just to kill? The monk was already dead. As the group prepared to leave, a large number of Bakenazumi appeared. The group thought the Bakenazumi would fear them, but instead, they launched an attack. The group scattered and fled. During the escape, Saki accidentally fell to the bottom of a valley. Just when she was in despair, Satoru appeared, bringing hope. But their hope was quickly dashed as they were surrounded by Bakenazumi. Instead of killing them, the Bakenazumi took the two back to their lair. After some thought, Satoru took out a fake nest snake egg and gave it to the guard, who swallowed it whole, causing an explosion in his stomach that killed him instantly. The two then began to flee, with the Bake Nezumi quickly in pursuit. Just as they were preparing for a desperate fight, a voice suddenly guided them to escape. Without thinking, they followed it, feeling lucky to encounter a speaking being at such a critical moment. They fell to the bottom of the valley again. It turned out that their savior was Squeal, the minister of the local duckneck, a tribe of insectivorous flies, responsible for the communication between Bake Nezumi and humans. Hence, he was very intelligent and eloquent. Squeal took them back to his tribe, where the queen had been waiting for them for a long time. The queen hid in the tent to welcome them, but Squeal accidentally set the tent on fire with a torch. The ugly queen was exposed in front of them in an instant. Furious and embarrassed, the queen was ready to bite Squeal to death. Saki made great efforts to dissuade her, saving Squeal's life. However, Squeal, ignoring his injuries, revealed that the attackers were from a foreign tribe of ground spiders. Their tribe was now in grave danger. He requested Saki and others to help their tribe. Satoru was thinking of making excuses to refuse, especially since their powers were sealed. But Saki became concerned. Squeal spoke softly. If they were defeated, they would become eternal slaves. The queen would be killed, and they would be drained and thrown into the back mountains as fertilizer. The two did not agree, but Squeal still respected their deities and hosted them. In the middle of the night, the guards at the door were attacked. The ground spider tribe had already launched an attack. The battle outside had begun. Hearing the noise, the two started to escape, but the confusing caves led them astray. They also encountered poison gas. The enemies caught up at the same time. Satoru threw a torch, instantly igniting the gas, causing a huge explosion that knocked them to the ground. Looking up at the sky full of stars, they thought they could leave, but realized that the light was actually emitted by fireflies. The fireflies poured down. Satoru protected Saki with his body. Fortunately, the ground fireflies only captured insects, harmless to humans. However, they were trapped inside, which also blocked the enemies. In despair, Saki suddenly remembered something: the school rule prohibiting sharing one's Mantora with others. But Satoru had left his Mantora in an imprint. Saki began to recite the sealing words, imposing a suggestion on Satoru. Then she told Satoru his own Mantora. Unexpectedly, Satoru truly recovered his power. Regaining confidence, Satoru immediately used his power to blast the earth above and disperse the poison fog. After coming out, Saki thought about leaving quickly, but Satoru disagreed, arguing that running away would only lead to being pursued. The best method was to annihilate the enemy to eliminate future threats. With just a glance, the boulder in front of the young man was instantly split in half, and the next second it was divided into countless blocks, precisely smashing towards the enemy. The incoming barrage of arrows also stopped in midair, reversing direction towards the enemy. This is the power of those who possess power. Satoru and Saki were nearly killed by the Bake Nezumi of the ground spider tribe. This incited a strong desire for revenge in Satoru. Luckily, Saki had secretly noted down Satoru's Mantora, successfully calling back his power. Thus occurred the scene at the beginning. Avoiding the enemy meant annihilating them. Then Satoru once again uprooted trees and controlled the trees to roam through the forest, taunting the Bake Nezumi. The Bake Nezumi took the bait as expected. Satoru then transformed into a demon, directly igniting the trees and smashing them onto the Bake Nezumi. In an instant, the Bake Nezumi were everywhere dead or injured. To continue deeper, Satoru controlled a huge rock to shield them. Soon they discovered the poison gas trap set by the ground spider tribe. Then with a tornado, he destroyed a parking lot, eliminating another wave. Satoru was still not satisfied, controlling the corpses of the Bake Nezumi. The Bake Nezumi were terrified. In a moment, the ground spider Bake Nezumi ambushing them were completely annihilated. Satoru wanted to continue deeper, but Saki was scared. She noticed that Satoru had changed. Just as the two were silent, Squeal appeared with his subordinates, pretending it was for their safety, deceiving their trust, leading them onto what they claimed was a safe path. In last night's battle, apart from the queen who was hidden away, all other Bake Nezumi were wiped out due to poisonous gas. Saki, vigilant, disguised themselves and another person as Bake Nezumi and proposed that two Bake Nezumi impersonate them. Sure enough, just a few steps later, their decoys were killed. The group dropped to the ground to avoid the enemy's poison arrows. Saki, with sharp eyes, spotted the enemy hiding in the trees. Satoru, with a single glance, shook the enemy out of the tree, causing their immediate death. Seeing the Bake Nezumi, which resembled stick insects, the two were momentarily stunned. Could they really change their shape at will? Later, they arrived at a pond where Saki, once again alert, sensed something unusual. The others, however, didn't think much of it. Just as they were about to leave, several frog monsters suddenly emerged from the pond, shooting poison arrows that swiftly dispatched several victims. Satoru let out an evil laugh and boiled the pond with his power. Yet, the real attack came from behind. Fortunately, Saki's timely warning allowed Satoru to control the boiling water in the pond, which dispatched the sneak-attacking mole creatures. Satoru was already beginning to tire, though he still talked tough. The enemy then launched a barrage of rocks, all of which Satoru managed to block, but his power was nearly depleted. Seeing the situation worsening, Squeal and his subordinates took off, abandoning the two. Taking advantage of the enemy reloading their ammunition, Saki spotted their scout. Satoru immediately set the scout on fire, causing the enemy to lose their vision and halt their attack. Squeal and his subordinates then returned. He continued to incite them to eliminate the enemy. Saki grew angry. Why were enemies everywhere on the safest path? Squeal continued to argue foolishly, and the two never realized they had been used. At this moment, the scout returned, indicating that there were no more enemies in the forest. Now they just needed to cross the forest to defeat the enemy's main force. Having come this far, the two felt compelled to see it through. After crossing the bamboo forest, they were stunned to see a gorge filled with tens of thousands of Bake Nezumi from the Earth Spider tribe. Satoru, weakened from excessive use of his power, was preparing to retreat when the enemy's catapults launched an attack. Unexpectedly, the minister once again ruthlessly abandoned them. In a moment of quick thinking, Saki had Satoru deflect the largest boulder to misdirect their attack. This tactic proved effective, and the two immediately fled. During their escape, they saw the captured minister, but they were also in no position to help themselves. Unexpectedly, the minister betrayed them. Satoru, struggling to summon his power, killed one creature, while another was slain by a small knife Squeal had concealed in his mouth. Squeal hurried over to thank them. The priority was to leave the area quickly, but Satoru, exhausted, could no longer move. However, the enemy suddenly withdrew at that moment. It turned out that the recent horn sound was made by a tribe called the Giant Hornets, the strongest in the Kanto region, boasting over 20,000 warriors. The tribe was led by Kirumaru, a newcomer granted a name in kanji. He effortlessly wiped out the Earth Spider tribe and then showed divine respect to the two. What followed was the takeover of the Earth Spider tribe, the elimination of their queen, the seizure of their offspring, and the enslavement of all their progeny, doomed to never rise again. This was the most precious spoils of war. Some pleaded for the Earth Spider Queen's life, but Kirumaru refused. With no other choice, the Earth Spider General had to atone with his death. He appeared with 2 balloon dogs. Satoru instinctively used his remaining power to protect Kirumaru, causing both him and Saki to faint. They were then taken back to the Giant Hornets tribe. Naive Saki was still relieved that everyone had been saved, but Satoru believed they were still in danger. Although they are loyal to humans, they do not necessarily obey them because they listen to the adults, which means they prioritize the commands of the ethics committee. Moreover, they have learned the truth about the world through the false Minoshiro, so the adults will certainly not let them go. Since the Kishiku people cannot kill each other, but the Bake Nezumi are different. The adults can order the Bake Nezumi to eliminate them. Think about those children at the academy who disappeared without Satoru's awakening power. The adults probably already know about them through Kirumaru. The two escaped overnight, and suddenly Squeal appeared, claiming to protect them, but was criticized by Satoru for not bringing troops, leaving Squeal speechless. But for now, they had no choice but to rely on this cunning fellow to escape. Squeal led them to the riverbank, but unfortunately, there were nighthawks used by Kirumaru for surveillance in the sky. Everyone had to wait by the lake until dawn when they unexpectedly encountered their lost companions. There was no time to explain, and they immediately took a small boat to escape. Without power, their progress was slow. Suddenly, Nighthawks appeared in the sky, and Kirumaru's warships appeared behind them. To everyone's surprise, Kirumaru came to help them. When they parted, Kirumaru made a strange request, asking everyone to keep the day's events a secret, or his life would be in danger, confirming Satoru's suspicion that Kirumaru was indeed involved with the ethics committee. At night, Saki helped Shun regain his power. After returning to school, everyone secretly retrieved their powers. They thought they had deceived everyone, but the ethics committee was already aware of everything. He is the strongest man on the surface who could easily split the earth in half if he wished, yet at this moment, he was scared back a few steps by a student. The school then immediately ordered classes to be suspended for reorganization. This school is also quite remarkable. To take classes, one must be in a relationship, and moreover, the relationship must be with someone of the same sex. This was all ordered by the school's ethics committee. They made boys pair with boys and girls with girls. Based on their study of bonobo social rules where bonobos relieve stress through male-female mating when stressed. The school strictly restricted heterosexual love to control the birth of psychics, as no one knew when someone capable of destroying the world might emerge. But under all these rules, there was still someone who attempted to break them, our protagonist Saki, who had secretly loved Shun all along. After Saki finds out about Shun's intimacy with Satoru, Saki understands that all this, and the next day, Shun broke up with Satoru. Because Shun also loved Saki, but Satoru quickly found a new love and deliberately flaunted it in front of Shun, aggravating Shun, who already had no outlet for his stress. Thus began the scene at the beginning. Shisei, the strongest man on the surface, came to the school to inspect, hoping to select a talented child for cultivation. Everyone showed their true abilities hoping to be chosen by Shisei, but Shisei already had a target in mind, the genius Shun, whose ability allowed him to control life, such as making a chicken egg that normally takes 21 days to hatch, do so in just 2 hours under the influence of power. Shun was regarded as Shisei's successor, but when Shisei approached, he unexpectedly stepped back and left the classroom without a word. The teacher hurriedly followed him, and upon returning, immediately announced the suspension of classes. Unconsciously, Saki glanced towards Shun, but he revealed a terrifying expression, smashed an egg on the ground, and inside it was the eye of a demon. Everyone asked Shun what was wrong, but he only said he might be too tired. Because Saki liked Shun, she was eager to know what was wrong with him and blocked his path at a place he had to pass. Saki tried to approach, but Shun loudly stopped her, lowered his head, indicating he wanted to be alone. Seeing his beloved confused, Shun took out 3 training balls that, without the control of power, still orbited around him. Shun mentioned that he might not be physically ill and needed time for treatment, refusing Saki's request to visit him, as she would likely not be allowed to visit anyway. Watching the despondent Saki, Shun softened his heart. It turned out that their contact with the Minoshiro 2 years ago and their subsequent attack had already been exposed. Since then, the ethics committee had been secretly watching their every move. For some reason, the 5 of them had not vanished like other children. Shun warned Saki to be careful of the cat, then gave her a collar that matched his family's dog's collar. Both the dog and Saki were very important to Shun. After that day, Shun never returned to school. The main group of 4, despite the risk of being monitored, split into 2 groups to find Shun. Maria and Mamoru asked around the school, while Satoru and Saki went to Shun's hometown. But upon reaching the outskirts, they found the village surrounded by caution tape. They decided to avoid surveillance by moving through the forest. Mamoru and Maria at school also noticed something was off. None of the children from Shun's district had come to school. In the forest, Saki and Satoru were stopped by a barrier. After breaking in, they found Bak Nezumi patrolling. As they delved deeper into the forest, it grew eerily strange with red trees bearing human-like faces and countless moth corpses on the ground, even with frost forming on the ground in midsummer. Everything was in chaos. Looking at their original village, it had turned into a large pit with 2 figures in the deep hole. Saki asked Satoru to create a mirror in the distance. As the mirror turned, Saki's head exploded with realization. The dark, withered tree in front of her was actually the beam of Shun's family mansion. She recognized it immediately from her childhood visits. On their way back, Saki was soul lost, wondering why the village had turned out that way and where her beloved boy had gone. At night, Saki tried to glean something from her parents. Her father just perfunctorily dealt with her, and when Saki tried to ask more, her mother sternly stopped her, her eyes brimming with tears, saying she didn't want to lose her. That night, Saki had a nightmare where she had a deceased sister she couldn't remember at all. Suddenly, a terrifying figure appeared at the window, almost scaring Saki out of her wits. Fortunately, it was Maria who appeared and hugged Saki, crying. It turned out that she and Mamoru had almost died. Maria and Mamoru had asked about Shun at school and learned that none of the kids from Shun's village had come to school. Then, thinking of what Shun had mentioned about the school courtyard, she used her levitation power to break into the courtyard. Inside, indeed, there were several strange storage jars. When they listened to them, they heard animal growls. Just then, the adults came in, including their teacher, talking about handling what was before the yokai. It turned out that the jars contained cat trick. Fortunately, she hid and avoided a disaster. The class teacher said it was a pity that the child was so talented. At that moment, Saki's pupils shook. She immediately packed her bags, started her boat, and quickly headed toward Shun's hometown. By then, someone had already taken Mamoru. After dodging the guards, Saki entered the forest alone. The fire elongated her shadow, making everything seem eerie. Suddenly, a cat trick appeared. With a roar swift as lightning, it bit into Saki's neck. It was then that Saki understood why Shun had given her a collar. She activated her power, and the cat trick turned to dust. The collar also fulfilled its purpose and shattered. After surviving the ordeal, Saki did not give up, but continued walking into the forest. Strangely, the entire forest was glowing, and the creatures were bizarrely mutated. Saki was almost lost to herself. Falling into a puddle, she heard a boy's whisper. The extremely intelligent boy only wanted to make friends, but had unknowingly accumulated deep karma. Why can't yokai live in the world? Why must I only be silent at the bottom of the lake? The girl murmured the boy's name. Shun's figure appeared on the trees. He did not want Saki to come close and controlled her from a distance, fearing his unconsciously leaked power would harm her. Knowing Saki had risked her life to see him, Shun finally appeared wearing a mask. He could only control his power for 10 minutes. During this time, he tried to explain everything. Shun took Saki to the last dilapidated house and tried to seal his power as much as possible into beads around his body. Shun said, "We've always been told that power is the manifestation of consciousness. That's why the school has established various rules to control it. But what people don't know is that power is always leaking, often unconsciously altering our surroundings. So, the barrier around the school isn't really to fend off enemies, but to confine those with power to prevent them from causing harm outside. For example, Minoshiro in ancient times were manatees, transformed into Minoshiro due to the influence of leaking power." As he finished speaking, Shun's dog appeared, now a monster due to Shun's power. Nevertheless, the dog remained Shun's good companion. Now completely transformed into a yokai, Shun had caused the destruction of his entire village, including his own parents. Tears streamed down Saki's face. Can't it be sealed? But what she could think of, the adults had already tried. Saki roared in despair, unable to do anything for her beloved. Just as she was preparing to part with her loved one, a cat trick broke in. Saki wanted to act, but was stopped by Shun, who now thought of death as a release. However, his dog appeared to protect him, even though it was no match for the cat trick. Unsurprisingly, the dog died. Already disheartened, Shun gave up. Even so, he remained gentle, blaming his indecision for the dog's death because the dog's constant presence had given him a will to live. The poison he drank had been altered by his unconscious power. Now, with the dog gone, he had no more attachments. His power began to run wild. Shun used his last bit of consciousness to confess his love to Saki and protect her as she left. In an instant, the cabin turned into a demonic shape, and Shun disappeared. 1,000 years later in Japan, although yokai are feared, they are at least restrained by Kishiku. Aki, however, are immune to Kishiku, essentially giving the nuclear launch button to a mentally ill person. Among them, The most famous was the child known as Kei, who could turn any normal scene into an extremely cruel one. The teachers noticed an anomaly and reported it. However, the higher-ups did not take it seriously because it had been 80 years since the last appearance of Aki. Kei was subjected daily to nonsensical psychological counseling and the verbal and physical abuse from his mother, who behaved like a mad dog. One day, the young boy finally exploded, unable to suppress the demon inside him any longer. The first victim was a teacher, followed by an endless slaughter. The most terrifying aspect was Kishiku. Kei could attack everyone, but due to Kishiku, no one could fight back. Kei roamed the earth, turning everywhere he went into a living hell. Ironically, Kei caught a cold and went to a clinic. After the nurse noticed, she informed the doctor, who instantly understood the situation. Despite the pressure, he examined Kei and asked the nurse to fetch some cold medicine. Since the medication was prepared by the nurse, the doctor, unable to reach Kishiku, injected Kei with a dose of medicine, tens of times stronger than normal, resulting in both their deaths. Consequently, the authorities decided to elevate the age of human rights to 17. Children would grow up under the surveillance of the Education Committee, and any sign of danger would be eradicated using methods such as cat trick and bake Nezumi. Reiko, from the earliest group of 5, was devoured by cat trick due to inadequate abilities, and everyone completely forgot about her, as if she had never existed. The same happened to Shun, who underwent yokai transformation and vanished from everyone's memory. Shun's place was taken by a boy named Ryu. However, Shun had been so significant in everyone's hearts that even the Academy's memory alteration techniques could not perfectly replace him. Ryu asked Saki out, intending to confess his feelings, but was rejected because the boy in Saki's memory did not seem to be Ryu. Moreover, a voice in the memory space kept calling out to Saki. The next day, when Saki asked Ryu about some camping details, he could not answer, which confirmed to Saki that he was not the boy she remembered. Later, she gathered everyone, and Satoru mentioned he vaguely remembered being in a relationship, but it definitely wasn't with Ryu, and that person's home was in the forest, not on the hillside. They all decided to go to the decaying village of Kuchiki to investigate. However, the village was desolate. They followed a barrier that led them to a vast lake at the end of the road. As they got closer to the truth, they repeatedly challenged the Academy's boundaries. Maria organized the fragmented memories in everyone's minds, revealing that every class had 6 people, so why was there only 4 in their class? Mamoru, the weakest, became frightened, convinced that the adults were hiding something to avoid being discovered. Maria comforted Mamoru and discouraged further discussion. They sent Mamoru home, and just as they were preparing to return, they were stopped by an adult. They thought their actions had been exposed, but surprisingly, it was Satoru's grandmother, who turned out to be the highest chair of the ethics committee, and she wanted to see Saki. Facing this extraordinary woman, Saki was stunned, and even more so when her grandmother suggested that Saki succeed her position. Naturally, Saki thought Satoru could not handle it himself. However, the grandmother mentioned she knew Saki's mother and had watched her grow up. Saki was shocked again to learn that the academy was not only a place of natural selection, but also monitored the students' personality indices. From ancient times, all leaders had scored high, and Saki was the one whose spirit was the most stable, never losing herself regardless of what happened. Moreover, she is the most perfect candidate in history. Even after learning about the bloody history from the false Minoshiro, she did not suffer a mental breakdown. This is why they have not been eliminated. This decision was made by the Education Committee, and also by Hiromi, a friend of the mother. It was because Hiromi pleaded on their behalf that the protagonists were spared, as the adults were simply too afraid. The 2 most terrifying things in this world are Aki and yokai. Although the current adults have never seen an Aki, the grandmother had witnessed one herself. The nearest one was Aki Kei, who nearly wiped out all his classmates until a doctor exchanged his life to eliminate him. Now, they eliminate those who are unqualified using Bake Nezumi and Cat Trick. The second terror is the yokai. A girl named Izumi demonstrated the terrible consequences of a yokai power leak. All living creatures around her were killed by her unintentional power leak, which even affected humans. The girl's parents turned into monsters themselves. Based on long-standing experience, the more powerful the children, the more likely they are to transform into yokai. They gave the girl some treatment drugs. Like Shun, she was inherently good and knowingly took the poison. This hints at why the old humans turned into Bake Nezumi. Saki cried and begged her grandmother to restore her memories of Shun, but it was clearly impossible. Even though she would not suffer mental breakdowns, it was uncertain if others could handle the truth. If she wanted to retrieve the memories, it meant she would have to take over her grandmother's position in the future. The next day, the group discovered that Mamoru had left a note and run away from home. The remaining three immediately decided to go look for him during recess. Saki blamed herself for telling Mamoru about the disappearing children, confirming her grandmother's words that the chain breaks at its weakest link. They followed the snowmobile tracks outside the barrier and found traces of Bake Nezumi and covered items, worrying everyone. Satoru thought that Mamoru, though not very powerful, would not have been captured. Eventually, they found Mamoru in a cabin. Unexpectedly, Mamoru said he had fainted and been rescued here. To their horror, it was Bake Nezumi who had rescued him, the same one Saki had saved from the river before. Mamoru then explained that he had to leave the village. He did not want to die because he had overheard that children were being eliminated and had already seen Cat Trick twice. Everyone was shocked since Cat Trick scouts its target before attacking, which is why some people disappear only after seeing Cat Trick multiple times. Moreover, after seeing Cat Trick, Mamoru recalled that he and Maria had seen Cat Trick in the courtyard while investigating before their memories were sealed. Maria remembered this as well. Since Mamoru was unharmed, it might have been a mistake by the academy. Satoru planned to go back and plead with the teachers. Anxious Saki decided to return as well, while Maria stayed with Mamoru. Upon their return, Saki faced an interrogation by the education committee. When asked why she did not bring Mamoru back, Saki was no longer afraid of them. Instead, she confronted the education committee, accusing them. Mamoru has seen Cat Trick twice recently. Why do you want to kill him? The adults were furious and vehemently denied the matter of Cat Trick, even stating outright that Saki had severely violated the rules and could be executed immediately. At that moment, Satoru's grandmother intervened, requesting that Saki be handed over to her for handling. The education committee does not understand. The grandmother directly stated that she was the one who told Saki all the secrets. She is a 1 in a million leadership candidate. She even took Saki to a room on the side where there were 3 cat tricks. The grandmother again extended an olive branch to Saki, saying, "Your group of children is the finest specimen I have ever seen. Despite numerous brainwashings, you still maintain independent thought and even dare to leave the barrier." The grandmother's following words chilled her to the bone. In ancient times, there was a weapon called a nuclear bomb. One could destroy an entire city. The management of nature is strict, and now they face the same situation. Every person has the potential to become an Aki, which means that there are currently 50,000 to 60,000 walking nuclear bombs across Japan. For the disobedient Mamoru and Maria, people are afraid, so they must be eliminated upon sight. Similarly, the education committee and all other institutions will not let them off. The grandmother gave Saki 3 days to bring the 2 back. She could ensure their survival. When parting, the grandmother told Saki that she was neither literate nor martially skilled. The reason she could become the chairperson was due to the knowledge she had accumulated over 260 years. Saki was shocked again. The grandmother's power could repair the telomeres in DNA, theoretically granting her an infinite lifespan. Subsequently, Saki and Satoru set off to find Maria and the others. However, this departure almost led to the annihilation of the new humans. Who could have imagined that the Bake Nezumi, who had lived in burrows 2.5 days ago, had mastered cement building techniques unknown even to modern humans, and even had factories capable of manufacturing various items, all achievements beyond the new humans' capabilities. While out searching for Maria and Mamoru, Saki and the others were targeted by the Bake Nezumi. During the pursuit, Saki accidentally fell off a cliff, but fortunately was rescued by the previously encountered carnivorous insect Bake Nezumi tribe. Squeala, ingratiatingly, expressed his gratitude to them. It was because of the previous help from the main group that the Bake Nezumi tribe had flourished today. Squealy had also received a name given by a human, Yakomaru. The two planned to ask Squeal for help in finding Maria and the others, but Squeal insisted on showing them the modern Bake Nezumi tribe first. Looking at the houses of the modern Bake Nezumi tribe, Saki was astonished. This was cement technology that the new humans had never possessed. Furthermore, after a previous Great War, over 18,000 Bake Nezumi had gathered into the current village, which had evolved from a slavery system to a parliamentary system. However, out of politeness, they still planned to visit their queen first. But Squeal intentionally diverted the conversation, seemingly unwilling to let them meet the queen, yet he had to obey the divine orders. Upon seeing the queen, the two were dumbfounded. She was pinned to the ground with countless steel nails, turned into a mere breeding tool. Now that they had stepped into civilization, the queen was still brutal, occasionally biting her own kind to death. Yet they had once sworn never to betray their queen. Similarly, fearing that the queen might harm the divine lord and risk the annihilation of their species, they had no choice but to turn the queen into a breeding tool. They too wanted to survive. It was the right of all intelligent beings. Isn't it written in your divine books as well? Squeal's words left Saki and the others unable to refute. Back in the previous cabin, Satoru thought that they couldn't trust Squeal's duplicity. Saki now only wanted to find Maria and the others. They needed the help of the Bake Nezumi. Besides, although they possess intelligence, the Bake Nezumi are ultimately mere beasts. We cannot impose human moral standards on them. Satoru finally voiced his true thoughts. The Bake Nezumi now possess things even humans don't have. It's possible that they even intend to replace humanity. But he immediately dismissed the idea, considering that any human could easily destroy a Bake Nezumi tribe nowadays. Saki, however, grew worried once again. But there was nothing they could do at the moment. They had to rely on the Bake Nezumi living outside their community to help find their companions. The next day, as soon as they opened the door, Saki was stunned. The Bake Nezumi now had military power, each one clad in armor. Without time to think further, they followed the Bake Nezumi army to the Zuzera Pirena tribe, the tribe that had once saved Mamoru. They immediately shouted at the tribe, but before getting a response, Squeal initiated war. Rockets ignited the trees halfway up the mountain, and the opposing Bake Nezumi quickly used snow to extinguish the fire. The counterattack was launched but was completely blocked. Squeal, turning around, flattered them, then provocatively told the two that the opposing tribe did not respect the gods. What a scheme! Squeal played this murderous strategy cunningly, but time was pressing, and there was no time to think further. Satoru used his power to level the camouflage at the entrance of the opposing tribe's cave. Thus, the Zuzera Pirena tribe, after many years, surrendered. However, a Bake Nezumi underling also mentioned that he did not know where Maria and another had gone, but they had left a letter. The letter contained Maria's enlightenment and farewell. She did not understand why the children had to be dealt with. "Life is like firing a kiln," she wrote. "Those children who do not meet the standards are like defective porcelain, smashed and discarded one after another. Rather than disappearing without reason, it's better to flee far away. By selecting the future society in this manner, what difference does it make from the dark ages described by the once false Minoshiro?" Maria also realized why the adults behaved this way, all out of fear of the children, not knowing whether the next egg would hatch an angel or that 1 in a million demon. There was a sense of throwing the baby out with the bathwater. She could not leave Mamoru behind, so she chose to flee far away with him. In the end, Maria asked Saki to tell the adults that she and Mamoru were already dead. Looking at their portraits, Saki wept bitterly. Later, they found Squeal and unified the story that Maria and Mamoru were dead. The minister even agreed to help them against the ethics committee's will, planning to provide their remains. Satoru exploded in anger, terrifying Squeal, who said he dared not offend the gods. The Bake Nezumi were just taller, similar in bone structure to human children. Although it was cruel, Saki had no choice but to agree with tears. Yet at that moment, the two did not realize that their decision was pushing new humanity step by step toward the abyss. He is the face of the outside world, named Kirumaru. Unlike other Bake Nezumi, short like mice, he stood as tall as an adult human. Not only that, but his combat abilities were formidable. Facing an enemy with tens of thousands more troops, he boasted that he would annihilate their 140,000-strong force within an hour. And he did, because they possessed things the new humans had never had. They could make shields to defend against attacks and had even developed firearms. Since Saki's unsuccessful search for Maria and the other, several years had passed. She was now 26 years old, holding a position called the Manager of Aberrations, with a nice-sounding title, the Bird and Beast Protection Organization, which in reality monitored the wars of the Bakenazumi. Watching from the sidelines as the tigers fight is why Kirumaru initially reports to Saki. In modern times, whether it is waging war or mobilizing personnel, Bakenazumi must report their actions. Otherwise, they risk annihilation. The Bakenazumi also refer to Saki and her companions as Reapers, lamenting their current strength in warfare, which even intimidates the new humans with their technological prowess. The battle soon ends, and Kirumaru returns to report the results, mocking himself for his earlier promises. Surprisingly, it took just over an hour to annihilate an enemy force of 140,000. In the evening, the head of the Department of Quirats returns. He had been supervising another battle involving the Zuzera Perina and Kirumaru's Spider-Wasp tribe. Unexpectedly, the Spider-Wasp tribe, originally under attack by the Zuzera Perina, turned traitor on the battlefield, leading to the destruction of other tribes that had come to assist. Saki recalls that the Spider-Wasp tribe never submitted a report of being attacked. A few days later, a dreadful outcome is reported. Kirumaru's Hornet tribe was completely destroyed, losing with a record of 100,000 to 0, shocking all human leaders. Normally, they do not interfere in the wars between Bakenazumi tribes, but such results were highly suspicious. More strangely, the deceased Hornet soldiers were found without weapons, and their bodies were unrecognizable. However, Kirumaru seems to have escaped. After the battle, Shisei also conducted an investigation at the site. The entire battlefield was burnt to a crisp, suggesting something was being concealed. There were suspicions that the insectivorous snake tribe might have obtained knowledge from false Minoshiro to create weapons of mass destruction, but this was soon refuted by Shisei. He found intact arrows from the Hornet tribe on the battlefield, indicating they did not possess bomb-like weapons. The only possibility remained that a person with power was aiding the Bakenazumi tribes, as only power could keep arrows in such perfect condition. The speaker, assuring with his position, confirmed that it was not someone from their village. Could it have been the escaped Maria and Mamoru? This theory was also rejected as the skeletons sent by Squealer were DNA tested and confirmed to be Maria's and Mamoru's. Shocked by this news, Saki concludes that all surrounding Bakenazumi must be eradicated, regardless of any conspiracies. There was a suggestion to wait until after the action to hold the summer festival, as any person with power could easily exterminate them. Why give up this annual time of entertainment? They would soon pay for their arrogance. During the festival, Bakenazumi disguised as human children poisoned many villagers with toxic wine. Before Saki and Satoru could alert everyone, a massive explosion replaced the summer fireworks. Armed Bakenazumi stormed the village, wantonly slaughtering the villagers. Surrounded in the central square, the villagers were not afraid as long as the strongest humans were present. Shisei and the monk dispersed the Bakenazumi's poison gas and eliminated a group hiding in the forest. The monk then made the Bakenazumi army turn on each other. However, arrogantly continuing with music and dance, the monk was unaware that Bakenazumi had already infiltrated the crowd. A gunshot later, the monk was killed. This thoroughly enraged Shisei, who singled out the Bakenazumi among the crowd and crushed them. He compressed the intended mutual destruction into his palm, and then shot it out. Following this, Shisei ordered everyone to patrol in groups of 5 around the village, showing no mercy to any Bakenazumi they encountered. Ironically, Hiromi, who proposed postponing the summer festival, died in this attack. The speaker was furious, swearing to make Squeal pay dearly, to beg for life, yet yearn for death. However, what everyone least expected was that the death of the arrogant monk, who could control the human brain, was the real purpose behind the Bakenazumi's attack on the village. Shisei had all the villagers group into teams of 5 to investigate around the village. Saki, Satoru, and 3 bystanders were dispatched to the hospital. The cleverest, Satoru, always suspected that Squeal still had an ace up his sleeve. However, the 3 proud bystanders still believed that with their power, they could easily annihilate the Bakenazumi. Upon arriving at the hospital, everyone was shocked. The hospital's main gate had been twisted into a large hole, clearly a deed only possible through power. The headstrong bystander A went alone to investigate. Satoru once again noticed something unusual. The area, usually filled with the sounds of insects and birds, was now eerily quiet. He presumed that a large number of Bakenazumi must be lying in ambush, waiting to strike once all were present. If they now called back bystander A, the Bakenazumi would realize their plan had been exposed, making it even more dangerous. The only option was to wait for the man to enter the hospital and then launch an attack on the surroundings. As the man entered the hospital, the four on the boat unleashed their power on the surrounding area, instantly turning the ambushing Bakenazumi into roasted rats. However, there was no response from the man who entered the hospital. As the group entered, they were ambushed again, with one of the girls nearly dying. Satoru created a mirror made of air, and the others used it to observe and eliminate the ambushing Bakenazumi, finding the body of the man who had entered earlier lying on the ground. They proceeded deeper and discovered humans tied up like rice dumplings. The hospital's doctors, who were in a state of panic, having lost all capacity for thought. One of the doctors regained his senses and urged everyone to flee quickly, while a nurse, having lost her mind, screamed continuously. Another doctor ran out recklessly, immediately turning into a ball of fire. The naive bystander, C, thought of extinguishing the fire to save him, but was instantly pulled into the sky, turning into a spray of blood. Footsteps were heard as the doctor urged the group to flee, suggesting they had a greater chance of survival if they split up. Satoru wanted to stop them, but he was stunned by the doctor's words. The person was Aki. Aki's appearance forced the group back into the hospital, where they dared not make a sound, listening to the screams of men outside. The frenzied nurse kept everyone from leaving, and the woman decided to stay. Saki and Satoru were tasked with quickly sending the news back to the village. Otherwise, their only fate would be annihilation. The two lay flat in the boat, and it was difficult to make out Satoru from the outside. They finally understood why the army of tens of thousands from the Hornet tribe was annihilated in seconds, but why the Bakenazumi had Aki was still a mystery. Suddenly, Satoru sensed Aki approaching from behind. In a critical moment, Saki came up with a plan. Satoru created a large mirror in the middle of the river, and they hid behind it, using their power to send Aki ashore. They removed the mirror and sped up the boat. Their hearts were in their throats as Aki set the boat ablaze, clearly not having discovered them. They spent the night in a small riverside cabin. The next day, they returned to the village via the river, which was the fastest but also the most dangerous way. Suddenly, they were attacked from the water, and a huge shadow swept by, turning the river water black instantly. Satoru activated Mantora to dispel the black fog. Together, they lifted the monster out of the water, revealing it to be a variant of Bakenazumi. It exhaled black fog. Saki realized something was wrong and pushed Satoru out of the way. A massive explosion blew Saki away, and she glided for kilometers using her power. Soon after, Saki was attacked again. A flying boulder nearly flattened her, but the attacker was relentless. It wasn't until Saki blocked the boulder with her power, which created a rainbow pattern, that the attacker realized they were facing humans. It turned out that the boy's parents had disappeared, and he had witnessed the entire war. The Bakenazumi had launched guerrilla warfare, launching surprise attacks from hiding and even disguising themselves as humans. By the end of the night, the attacking Bakenazumi were mostly cleared out. However, this was still just a tactical maneuver by the Bakenazumi, allowing the humans to exhaust themselves after a night of fierce fighting. The mutant mosquito fish that Saki and her group encountered had infiltrated the village through the waterways, releasing black smoke that flattened the village. The boy was dispatched to intercept the water routes. It must be said that the Bakenazumi were really formidable. Without the waterways, human escape routes were compromised, making it easy for the Bakenazumi to encircle them again. At this point, the school had turned into a hospital, and council members were injured. Saki relayed Aki's situation to her, shocking the council member immensely. She couldn't believe it, given the strict management by the education committee. Now, even the council members were helpless. Noise from outside indicated that Aki had arrived. The council member instructed Saki to lead everyone to Shojuji, where some safety officers were still present. She stayed behind to avoid slowing others down, and then transferred her position to Saki. Just as everyone was preparing to evacuate, Shisei appeared. He was the strongest human on the surface, easily capable of splitting the earth in two. Yet, at that moment, he was subdued by a little girl rubbing him into the ground. The little girl, a human, surprisingly knelt before the Bake Nezumi. The Bake Nezumi, enslaved by humans for a century, had finally risen in revolt. The new humans were caught off guard, even leveling the village. Saki met Counselor Tomiko, who assigned her to take over her position. As Saki was preparing to head to Shojuji, the strongest warrior, Shisei, appeared. Just as he was organizing everyone to unite in resistance, the ground suddenly collapsed. It turned out the Bake Nezumi had hollowed out the underground. After the dust settled, Shisei managed to save most of the villagers. The hidden Bake Nezumi began their futile resistance, but Shisei quickly captured all of them, questioning and killing one after another. However, a horrifying scene unfolded as countless villagers flew up in the distant sky, already reduced to rubble, while a figure slowly approached on the ground. Shisei was stunned as several villagers ascended from their original spots. When Saki recognized the approaching figure, she was utterly dumbfounded. Blurted out a name, Maria. The little girl looked strikingly like Maria. Indeed, this girl was the child of Maria and Mamoru. After their escape, they were captured by Squeal, who forced them to have a child and then killed them. This explained the two skeletons that Counselor Tomiko mentioned, which were confirmed to be theirs through DNA comparison. The child, raised as a Bake Nezumi, didn't consider herself a yokai or Aki, but rather a glitch by Squeal. Believing she was a Bake Nezumi, she felt no compunction about killing humans and did not trigger Kishiku. Back to the present, Shisei's face broke into a cold sweat as the girl launched her attack, controlling massive rocks to trap Shisei. However, physical attacks were useless. Shisei broke free from his restraints and even turned the surrounding sand into soil, causing the little girl to fall into a pit. Satoru found Saki and urged her to retreat quickly. The outcome had already been determined, just as Satoru had said. Noticing that physical attacks were ineffective, the girl directed her power straight at Shisei's body. She let out a chilling laugh resembling the clinking of barbells, while Shisei's body emitted creaking noises. With a snap, the god of the new humans fell. In that moment, the identities of the Bake Nezumi and humans were completely reversed. Saki and a bystander fled into the Bake Nezumi's burrow as screams echoed from above ground. Inside the burrow, they encountered a Bake Nezumi that had just been knocked unconscious. They demanded to know the whereabouts of Squeal, telling the Bake Nezumi that Squeal had merely used them as cannon fodder. To their surprise, the current Bake Nezumi were incredibly united and even revered Squeal as a hero, putting the greater good above individual lives, with their savior already appearing to overturn the rule of the new humans. The Bake Nezumi then killed itself by running headlong into a wall. Without time to think, they had to rush to Shojuji to find Saki's parents and the monks. Nimi, however, was unwilling to leave with them as he had a mission to go to the broadcasting station. Even if he could help one person escape, it would be worthwhile. The broadcast announced Aki's arrival and then played the song they used to listen to every day after school. Saki suddenly realized that the village's water channels were dry. The power for the broadcast was generated by Mr. Nimi using his power to drive a generator. Suddenly, the broadcast stopped abruptly. When the two arrived at Shojuji, the monks were already waiting. However, Saki's parents had returned to the village before their arrival, planning to release all the cat tricks to fight Aki. Before leaving, they left a letter for Saki. They also met Inui, who had gone to fight the carnivorous snake tribe. Of his squad of 5, he was the only survivor. After searching for several days, they finally found the carnivorous Midge tribe. After eliminating the guards, a human girl appeared. The rest of his 4 comrades went forward to investigate and were instantly killed by the little girl. He hid there for 4 days until the Bake Nezumi began to migrate, allowing him to escape. Upon returning home, he found the entire village deserted, and all the human infants had been taken by the Baka Nezumi. Saki recalled what Kirumaru once said about enslaving the young to prevent them from ever rising up. Everyone finally understood that this was Squeal's ambition. If Maria's child could kill the strongest human, Shisei, once those children grew up, the world might well be dominated by the Bake Nezumi. Saki's parents' letter carried their last hope of defeating Squeal. Saki described the appearance of the Aki girl to the monks, who then initiated a ritual hoping to influence the Aki's psyche, causing her to experience Kishiku and thus restrain her actions. Her mother mentioned in the letter that while researching, they discovered a superweapon left in Tokyo by the old humans, developed by non-power humans to destroy those with power, colloquially known as the superpower destroyer. Since this weapon does not give a real sense of killing, it would not trigger Kishiku. Her mother also left behind a mini encyclopedia, False Minoshiro. Once activated, it would lead them to the weapon. Before setting off, they also went to see Kirumaru. Inui had encountered the Aki girl when he was escaping, but fortunately, he mimicked the voice of a Bake Nezumi and avoided a disaster. Later, he fainted and lost consciousness. It was Kirumaru who saved him. Kirumaru, being a Bake Nezumi, was also imprisoned. Despite this, Kirumaru was very respectful towards the two of them and shared how he had narrowly escaped death at the hands of an Aki. It was known to Squeal that Kishiku had formulated the current strategy. Kirumaru had a good understanding of Tokyo. Subsequently, they boarded a submarine intending to reach Tokyo via the waterways. Although the submarine was excellent, it needed to surface frequently to ventilate, which led to it being discovered by the Aki. With no other option, everyone had to exert their utmost effort, disregarding the traps set by the Bake Nezumi. After several hours, they arrived in Tokyo 1,000 years later. According to people, the area was filled with toxic gas that was deadly upon contact. However, the sky was swarming with bats, and there were some plants on the sandy ground, but no signs of poison. Nibai finally charged up in the sun. According to the false Minoshiro's coordinates, they had reached their destination, and the Bake Nezumi had caught up to them. Now they could only head underground to hide, but the underground was said to be home to many giant creatures. When Kirumaru had led his troops here in the past, they suffered heavy losses. With no choice, they had to hide underground. False Minoshiro began to explain the origin of the weapons. It turned out that the US psychic purging program had developed bacterial weapons that could enter a dormant state, which is why they could still be used 1,000 years later. Hearing how dangerous this weapon was, Saki became hesitant. Soon, they came to a disgusting cave, crawling with all sorts of nauseating insects. Saki felt like retreating, but encouraged by Kirumaru, she had to overcome her fear and move forward. Kirumaru, however, said this was just the beginning. False Minoshiro confirmed the direction they should head. Kirumaru also smelled the scent. Aki and Squeal had caught up, and their numbers had likely been exposed by the smell. Suddenly, Satoru was attacked by a bug that fell on his head. The bug frantically sucked Satoru's blood. Kirumaru quickly instructed Saki to use her power to sear the creature to make it drop off, as it was dangerous. As the bugs fell, they were incinerated by her power. Saki thought this was hell, but Kirumaru said this was merely the appetizer. As they continued forward, they encountered creatures with low intelligence and 2 heads, noodle-like creatures that were afraid of fire, and the most terrifying of all, ticks called Black Widows. They swarmed like army ants in terrifying numbers. It was such small creatures that had caused heavy losses to Kirumaru's army in the past. Despite this, the group had to keep moving forward. Soon, an underground river blocked their path. To reach upstream, they would have to bring the submarine in from outside the river. Subsequently, Saki and Inui prepared to return to the surface to retrieve the submarine, while Kirumaru and the others created a diversion to confuse the enemy. They soon found the submarine, and through false Minoshiro, they learned about nearby monsters. Inui began to doubt Kirumaru, who had explored here before and had warned them that the seaside at night was dangerous. Knowing they would retrieve the submarine at night, why hadn't he mentioned the monsters? With no time to ponder, they had to trust that Kirumaru had simply forgotten. As they entered the sea, they encountered a monster resembling a snail, which also emitted light. Saki was terrified, but fortunately, Inui used his power to kill the monster instantly. With no time for fear, they had to set off immediately. They arrived at the agreed-upon location but found no one else there. With time pressing, they continued onward only to be blocked by a massive stone wall. Forcing a hole using power might trigger a collapse. They were very close to the weapons at this time. With no other options, they had to physically swim underwater. Just then, the massive creature attacked again, What they didn't know was that such monsters usually come in pairs. Inui sacrificed himself. Saki narrowly escaped. With no other choice and bearing the hopes of all humanity, she continued on despite her grief. Finally, she reached a laboratory where the superweapon was stored. As Saki destroyed the safe with her power, she took out the power destroyer stored inside. Humanity's last hope. Soon, Saki found Satoru. Kirumaru suggested they either retreat first and plan again, or take this opportunity to eliminate Aki. In the end, they chose to face Squeal. Kirumaru covered himself with bat feces to mask his scent, rendering himself virtually invisible. He took their clothes to draw out the enemy. That's when Saki developed a case of the Madonna syndrome. Aki was just a child. Satoru was furious enough to want to twist her head off. Quickly, Kirumaru lured out the Bake Nezumi and Aki. The two in hiding killed several Bake Nezumi to attract attention, hoping to draw Aki into a cave. However, they weren't the only ones with a strategy. Squeal had already set traps in the cave. The two almost got buried by quicksand. When they realized the truth, Aki, holding a torch, slowly appeared behind them. Saki fell ill again. She still wanted to try to awaken Aki, thinking she just didn't know she was human. Satoru created a mirror, hoping Aki would see her reflection and recognize her human form. But it was of no use. Not all creatures in nature have a concept of self. Aki's roar shattered the rocks, exposing them completely. Seeing no chance to escape, Satoru threw a virus at Aki, seizing what Kirumaru called the best opportunity. As the vial broke, billions of viruses spread rapidly. This time, Aki was doomed. At such close range, Satoru would definitely be infected too. Saki fell ill again and burned the virus with a fire, scorching Aki's eyes. Just as Aki was about to retaliate, she was blocked by flying debris. Kirumaru appeared, commanding them to start running. Though Kirumaru said little, he probably wanted to kill Saki in his heart. Kirumaru stated that the only thing to do now was to destroy the entire cave and die with the Bake Nezumi. But Saki's Madonna syndrome flared up again. To her, little girl was not Aki, but just mistaking herself for a Bake Nezumi. By now, Kirumaru had dropped the act. He had come to Tokyo initially to obtain the superweapon to overthrow human rule. Saki suddenly came up with a clever plan. Have Kirumaru pretend to be human and run out. If the girl killed Kirumaru and realized she was human, she would no longer attack Saki and Satoru. If she still thought she was a Bake Nezumi, she would die because of Kishiku. Saki was truly a devil. However, Kirumaru agreed under the condition that the queen of the Wasp tribe must survive after it all. Then, the two devils began to clear out the Bake Nezumi outside to prevent interference with the plan. Kirumaru, dressed in Satoru's clothes, charged ahead, with Saki following behind. In my opinion, Kirumaru was a true hero. Despite knowing he would die, he moved forward for the sake of his tribe. Aki attacked again, and Kirumaru was pierced through his body. He then tore off the bandage on his face, which immediately triggered a reaction for Kishiku and attack suppression. The girl began to have difficulty breathing and suffered a cardiac arrest, collapsing and dying on the spot. Saki experienced a Kishiku reaction due to her indirect killing, repeatedly muttering, "I did not kill anyone," but she surprisingly survived. From a distance, Squeal helplessly watched the girl on the ground. For 10 years he had been part of a revolution, overthrowing the queen and devising strategies, almost overthrowing the rule of the new humans. However, with the girl's death, everything came to an end. The ensuing conversation could only be described as ridiculous. Even now, Saki and Satoru still believed the Bake Nezumi were at fault. Squeal no longer wanted to argue with these clowns. Squeal harbored resentment toward the new humans who ruthlessly exterminated his entire species as if squashing ants. Soon, Squeal faced his trial, which led to the soulful quote of the entire anime. However, Squeal's defense was met with laughter because regardless of the trial's outcome, his death was inevitable. Evil forces do not last forever. He proclaimed, "Even if I die, someday someone will carry on my will. That will be the end of human tyranny." They subjected Squeal to extreme punishment, making him wish for death. Afterward, according to the agreement, Saki preserved the Wasp tribe and several other tribes loyal to humans. She also discovered a piece of history that new humans had banned. The term Bakenazumi appeared hundreds of years ago, seemingly a combination of human and mole names. Satoru's investigation revealed that besides olive trees and humans, Bakenazumi also have 23 pairs of chromosomes, indicating they could not have evolved from 30-chromosome rats. Saki was confused and recalled a question Shun had raised when they encountered false Minoshiro as children. Where did the people of the slave dynasties and hunter-gatherers go? Now, the truth surfaced. The new humans had edited Kishiku and attack suppression into their genes to rule over those without power, transforming them into Bakenazumi just to maintain their dominance. Thus, people like Saki should have Kishiku. Satoru then made a statement that roughly meant that chimpanzees and humans are similar, but you still would not consider them humans. After learning the truth, Saki went to the museum where Squeal had become just a ball of flesh. Not wanting him to suffer anymore, she sent him away. This anime gives us much to ponder, just as the new humans pride themselves on being just while viewing the Bakenazumi as evil, not realizing that the evilest ones are the new humans themselves.